Chaya content.
Everybody mute yourself and let Aaron speak.
So Chaya contacted me last week and asked me if I'll introduce Rabbi Tanzer's shiur. To be honest with you, I wasn't quite sure what she meant by that. And I'm not sure that I'm qualified to introduce Rabbi Tanzer on anything. But we spoke a little bit, and it quite excited me. And I said to her, to be honest with you, Pirkei Avot is not really a subject I feel confident speaking about. Not something that I spend a lot of time on. And I said yes, and I said yes because I liked the idea more than knowing what I was going to say. But then I actually thought about it and thought to myself, it was quite amazing because Pirkei Avot, really, what's Pirkei Avot? Pirkei Avot is about Masorah. Moshe Kibel Torah Misinai, Masal Yeshua Eskanim, etc. It's all about Masorah. And the crazy thing is, if you look, Pirkei Avot spans a period of about 1,200 years. They say about 800. Actually, do the maths. It's more like about 1,200 because Matan Torah is about 1,200 BCE, right? And the last Tana mentioned in the whole thing is Ben Haha, and because it's the end of the fifth parak, the sixth parak is already added on, right? So end of the fifth parak is Ben Haha, and he was a contemporary of Hillel, and they lived around about the turn of the century. So it's around about 1,200 years. So I thought that's a hell of a long Masorah. I don't have a Masorah 1,200 years, but when I think about Rabbi Tanzer, to be honest, it's only about 53 years, Rabbi Tanzer. I think how long have you been in South Africa?
56 years.
Well, I'm only 53, so 53 years, okay. Right? And so that's the length of my Masorah. And the truth is that it's quite crazy because, I studied shul next to Howard Abrams. And it's mind-boggling to think how many times Howard and I at shul will sit and we'll hear something or somebody will say and we'll both independently comment about that's something Rabbi Tanzer said this, Rabbi Tanzer said that. It's ridiculous. I'm sitting here in Telmon, Jungen Hazel, and Howard and I are sitting and discussing Rabbi Tanzer. And when you think about it, really, I left Yeshiva College in standard 9. So at school, I was never a shiur Rabbi Tanzer at school, but I was fortunate because I was close to Dovi, I still am close to Dovi, and I spent a lot of time in their house. And I had a relationship with Rabbi Tanzer on all different levels. So was it dabbling in the Yeshiva College shul, obviously, and going to shiurim and at the school and in their house. And then afterwards in Bnei Akiva, we didn't always agree. Rabbi Tanzer didn't always like anything that I said or did. But nonetheless, we had an interaction. And I still remember to this day, even though I wasn't the best student in school, I remember to this day Rabbi Tanzer's Aloches shiur after davening used to learn, if I'm not mistaken, from the Sefer HaMitzvot of the Chofetz Chaim.
You see, you're right. Long forgot.
And I remember, and I still to this day quote halachas that I remember him saying. I don't know what class I was in, standard 6, standard 7, standard 8. So that's crazy, and that's, I think at the end of the day, that's really the idea of Moshe Kibel Torah Yeshua, Masali Leskanim, Moshe Kibel Torah Sinai, Masali Yeshua, etc. Is the idea of a Masorah. If you've got a Rav who's a Talmid Chacham around you, then at the end of the day, even if you aren't a good Talmid, you imbibe with the Masorah, and somewhere along the line, it sits inside of you and it stays with you. And then some time along the line, it comes out. So you don't even appreciate it. It's almost like an osmotic type of experience that goes on. And that's what our Masorah is about. But I just want to say one thing, and really, God forbid, I'm not in any way want to give a Pirkei Avot shiur. But there's one thing that came to mind. I've gone through a stage the last year or so where I've been quite involved in studying stuff of the Gra. And the Gra is a parish on Pirkei Avot, like on his parish on most things. And there's one thing that struck me over here, because in the first Mishnah, that says, Moshe Kibel Torah Sinai, Mashal Yeshua, Yeshua Eskanim, Eskanim Levim, Levim Masorah Anshekas HaGedolah. And then it said, Chaim Amru Shlosha B'yom. They eventually said 3 things. So what do they say? Hevu Metunim Badin, okay, which I think to a large extent does reflect Rabbi Tanzer. But that's what I wanted to say. V'hamidu Talmidim Harbei. I said, you've got to make sure that you establish lots of Talmidim. And it's quite interesting that the Gra on that sends us to a Gemara in Yevamot, on Daf Samech Bet Amud Bet, where he quotes something which I think is a little bit odd at first, because he quotes the pasuk, right? He quotes the pasuk from Kohelet, which says, "Baboker zera et zaracha v'erev al tanach yadecha ki encha yodea eze yachshar or ze im shneim kechad tovim." And that's the Gemara. That's the classic Gemara here, the story of Rabbi Akiva who lost all his talmidim. So it's a bit odd that the Gra chose that story because it's not really a happy story. It's got a happy ending, but it's got a pretty sad story in the middle. But I think when you actually look in the Gemara and you take it out of its context, out of the story of the Gemara, just look at the way that the Gemara discusses the pasuk, it makes sense what that is about. So the Gemara quotes Rabbi Akiva is machlokes Tanaim here and how to understand that pasuk between Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says, "Omer lamad Torah b'yalduto yilmod Torah b'ziknuto." Person who learned Torah when he's young should learn Torah when he's older. Now I remember the legend goes, but I believe that Dovi assures me that it's true. That Rabbi Tanzer used to get up in the early days at 4 o'clock in the morning and learn before he used to go to shul. And when he was young, he was learning. And I can vouch for not so long ago being back in South Africa on a visit, I don't know, probably 15 years ago on a Shavuot, Tikkun al Shavuot, at about 5 o'clock in the morning, walking into the big shul and seeing Rabbi Tanzer sitting on his own in the corner with the Gemara in front of him, going at a Gemara all by himself. And that's something which I'm sure he still does to that day. So that's the easy part of it. But then he says up here, Akiva says, "Ayu lo talmidim beyalduto, yiyu lo talmidim beziknuto." When he's got children, talmidim when he's young, so he'll have children when he's older. And then the Gemara goes into Akiva and his children died, and you don't know who's going to be the best, etc., etc. But I think the Gra takes it out of context here. And I wanted to say out of context, because I remember about Tanzer telling me once something many, many years ago, and he said to me that he always stays the same because his students never get older. I don't know if you remember telling me that. But you told me that. We once spoke, and I said to you, what's it like teaching the same people time and time again? You know. So he said to me, look, the good thing is I never get old. He said, my talmidim always the same. I've got students in standard 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I said, I never get old. I'm always staying young, teaching the same talmidim. So I think it's a mindset. It's a mindset. And that's, I think, what he's saying over here. To have lots of talmidim, you know, your person has lots of talmidim, but at a stage he stops having talmidim because he gets too old. But you're never too old to have talmidim. But more than that, I think your talmidim always stay your talmidim. You never change. Your talmidim, when I was done at 6, I was your talmid, and now I'm way past that at 6, and I'm still your talmid. And in the process, you've added I don't know how many thousands along the way. So that's exactly living exactly what Pirkei what he's saying in terms of the graph. So for me, and I always get excited. Rabbi Tanzer phones me for a simcha or for some occasion. And it's always exciting when he's on the other end of the phone. And it's a crazy relationship because if you think about it, we're not really friends, right? I mean,
yeah, we are friends. What are friends all about?
No, but I'm saying you're Rosh Yeshiva and I was your talmid. And we never went drinking together, if you know what I mean. And that's not true. We did, but we never went drinking together. But that's what I meant. And yet we've got a relationship that spanned. I don't know. I've been in Israel already for 27 years almost, long time, and we still a relationship which spans it as a Rav Talmid. And that's exactly what it's about. That's the Masorah. So I want to thank Chaim for inviting me, and I want to thank my children for all joining, or most of them joined, I think. There's Eitan, and I realize if you look behind Razan is Eitan. Eitan got engaged, by the way. He's getting married, please God, in December. He just finished the army. Next to him is Ro'i, that's our oldest son. He's not engaged yet, although maybe you've got a good for him. And Gabi, my third son over here with the short hair, he's going into the army in a few weeks. He's just been 2 years in Yeshiva. And Jonathan, where's Jonathan? Jonathan, show your face quickly. That's Jonathan. he's just finished Yud Aleph, and he's going into matric. I don't know where's Ariel. I don't know where my little boy is somewhere. But 9-year-old. That's it. And, nice to be here. Thank you very much.
Nice to see you all. Thank you.
Okay.
When I see the Chava and Chaya together, that's something I haven't seen for a long time, and it takes me back to 2005, and we'll leave it at that.
Okay. There in Roseanne, children, it's a great pleasure to see you all. A pleasure and a privilege to see you all. There you evoke beautiful memories. I wish they were all true. I wish they were still happening today. But it was lovely to hear them. lovely that you remember them, and lovely to think that was what our lives were all about. But speaking of Masura, I have to talk about your Masura. You have a Masura too. Your father Basil does a Messiah. Morning, afternoon, evening, there's a shiur he's there. He's the only guy in Johannesburg that never leaves the city without coming to see me and say goodbye. Only guy in the city of Johannesburg. If he has to travel me to find me at home, he'll come. And you know what? He's a great Masura. He loves to quote his father. His father was obviously a Jew at Yedias, Torah and Shas, etc. Yedias in Jewish Masura, and Basil loves to talk about it. Dura. So you come from Masura, and you're passing on a beautiful Masura. You and Rosam, both of you together, and Hashem should continue to bless you. Mazel tov for the Chosim, mazel tov to those who will be Chasanim, only Simchas and Achas, always. And thank you so much for that beautiful introduction, which I will never forget. Thanks a lot. All right, let's see how far we get here today. All right. The thanks to the Avraham, we had an interesting interpretation into the words of the Anshe Knesset Agdola. The Anshe Knesset Agdola, as we have been saying, was the beginning of a Yerida. In other words, Nevuah had ended. The age of Nevuah had ended. So everything ended. Once we didn't have Nevi'im who told us what the Hashem was about, it wasn't the same. And so they lived at a time when the Nevuah ended, and they had to decide how do we face the Jewish future? How do we keep it alive? And they gave us a structure. They gave us a structure, Kiddush, Havdalah, Davening, Kriyat Shema, Amida, how, what, when, where, cool. They gave us our constitution. And they said the three things. They said, first they said, be careful before you speak. Be careful before you speak. And then what's the third thing they said? And nu Torah. So the Avraham came along and he said on the Mishnah, so we're learning now, that each one relates to something they said. In other words, they said the world. And actually, I'm making a mistake. I'm referring to Shimon HaTzadik. Shimon HaTzadik said, Torah Aveda Gemilas Hasodim. Everybody knows that. Torah Aveda Gemilas Hasodim, that's what it's all about. And so came along Avraham, and he said, in the following Mishnayot, right after that, we have these things personified. These things are personified. Number one, first of all, came along Antigonus Yisrael, and what did he talk about? He talked about not to serve Hashem, not to Kabul Pras. He's talking about Aveda. So you have Torah, Aveda, Gemilas Hasodim. So he's referring to the overall. In our relationship to Hashem, what is Aveda? How do we serve Hashem? What should the intent be? And then we have the Tzedukim, etc., that came out of that. All right. Then the next mission after that, now we have, after Antigonus, we had the first of the Tanoim, members of the Sanhedrin. That's Yossi ben Yoezer of Tzreda, Yossi ben Yochanan of Yishleim, and they both said something. And each one says that Avraham was referring to the other two things. Yossi ben Yoezer was referring to Torah. How do you make sure you have Torah? How do you guarantee Torah in your house? So he had a mitzvah. You must create an ambience. You have to create an ambience in advance where Talmidei Chachamim feel at home when they want to come. If a Talmid Chacham feels at home and feels your house is where he wants to be, he's going to bring a message your children, your family will pick up. And if he doesn't feel at home, he's not going to come. And if you're not the kind of person that you think you are, he's surely not going to come. So he said, he basically that was his approach. How do we bring Torah into the house? Now one could be forgiven. Someone in Portion point out that Yossi ben Yoezer is talking about Talmid Chacham. What about the rest of the people? Are the rest of the people cut out? So thanks to the Abarbanel said that Yosef ben Yochanan, Yosef ben Yochanan Ish Yerushalayim, he comes along and he's providing the Gemilas Chasodim. There's Gemilas Chasodim, another concept called Gemilas Chasodim, which he elaborates on, and that puts together Torah, Avodah, Gemilas Chasodim. So all three are being commented on by the following three Mishnayot that follow Shimon HaTzadik's prophetic words. Now, interesting, when I was preparing today's shiur, it occurred to me in the middle of while I was sleeping, as a matter of fact, it occurred to me an interesting thing. We're talking about Gemilas Chasodim. And Gemilas Chasodim and Tzedakah are not the same. Yes, Tzedakah is part of Gemilas Chasodim. It goes without saying. To be about Tzedakah, you have to be a Gemilas Chesed. But they're really separate things. As a matter of fact, I took out the Kitzur Shulchan quotes the Rambam here in his introduction in the Perek Lamadal, the Hilchos Tzedakah. What are his opening words? Mitzvah tasei. It's a mitzvah asay of the Torah, litain tzedakah l'ani Yisrael, to give tzedakah to the Jewish poor. Litain tzedakah l'ani Yisrael, that's tzedakah. In other words, all the other nice things we talk about are great. They're all great. And eventually they come down to money, so they come down to tzedakah too. But mitzvah tasei is a positive command to give tzedakah to Jewish poor. That's not the same as anything else. Not the same as yeshivas. Nothing. The essence of tzedakah is Ani Yisrael, and there always are poor people around, and there always are poor people around. So the mitzvah never goes away. And Shenema, he says, he quotes a pasuk in the Torah. The Torah says, you have to open your hand when you give him. In other words, you have to be compassionate. You have to feel the guy's in need. You have to worry about his sah. And it also says, your brother must live with you. You must see to it that he can live. And he goes on to say, anyone who sees a poor person who's looking for tzedakah, and he closes his eyes, the poor man is asking for tzedakah, he doesn't like tzedakah, and he doesn't give him tzedakah, even below saseh. You hear that? If a person is asking for tzedakah and doesn't give anything, turns the guy down flat, they don't like the way he looks, or whatever it is, he's transgressing the Leisah Shenema, because the pasuk says, do not harden your heart, don't close your fist when it comes to tzedakah. And goes out to say, tzedakah is a sign of the children of our Avinu. We are Balei tzedakah. Okay, so it's an interesting concept. The Mishnah we're about to learn talks about Gemilas Chasodim, covers everything, covers anything a guy might need, goes into Gemilas Chasodim. But the essence of the Mishnah of tzedakah, the ten tzedakah l'ani Yisrael. Our good friend Rabbi Tau, Malka's husband, has a son called Shimon Tau, who wrote a magnificent sefer here, full of lumdus, full of mekuris on the laws of tzedakah and ma'aser, which I was looking at this afternoon, and it's rather fascinating. In other words, what we just learned was that if a person is asked to give tzedakah, you got to give. You can't say no. Now, it doesn't mean you have to give what the guy wants. You may not be able to. You're entitled to that too. And he even makes a distinction about a person who goes around in public collecting tzedakah, you're allowed to give him less because he's advertising his situation and many people will help him. Or a guy talks to you private and he wants your private help, you have to listen carefully. I actually found it frightening. You have to listen carefully and do what you can do. Do what you can do. As a matter of fact, by the time we hear his song, that is, Shimon Tal makes a point that the idea that we have pushkas in shul during davening when people put tzedakah in was born out of the fact that there's a minimum of tzedakah a Jew has to give a year. It's very little. It's a third of a shekel. In today's American dollars is virtually pennies. But they used to collect it in shul, so that in the course of a year, everybody gave that, right? So in other words, if a person never gave tzedakah Except when the Pushkin came around, he kept the halacha at a minimum, but that's the minimum. That's the minimum. I remember, I'm digressing. I remember I once saw an anecdote from Rav Avraham and Rosh Yisrael, a very distinguished Talmud of Slobodka, the Harvard of the yeshivas in Europe. Rav Avraham was asked by somebody collecting money for a chosin. He said the guy asked him, listen, he says, if I tell the people who I'm collecting for, they're going to give me more money. If I don't tell them, they're going to give me less money. Am I entitled to tell them who I'm collecting for? His answer was unequivocal. He said, no, you're not allowed to sell a person's dignity. Unless he tells you it's okay, etc., you can't do that. You have to be happy to accept whatever you get from people, even though you know it's much less, because a person's dignity is worth money too. Interesting approach, that a person's dignity is worth an awful lot, and etc., but at the same time, this halacha of the Shulchan Aruch made it clear that one is not allowed to say no. Make believe you didn't see the guy, he's not good enough. Anyhow, let's come to the Mishnah here. The Mishnah we're learning over here is Yosef ben Yochanan Mishleim. He said, listen to these words. Listen carefully to the words. What he says? Let your house be open. Let your house be open. Lirvacha. What's lirvacha? Now the word lirvacha for the first time is used in Sefer Shmos during the Makot, when after the Tzfardim, after the plague of the frogs, etc., all of a sudden Paro saw you could live with it. Whatever you live with, ravacha, it became a little relaxed. The plague became a little relaxed, and you could live with it. So the word ravacha he translates, and so does Samson Hirsch, who I have in front of me here. He says, you know what it means? Relief. There's relief. In other words, your house should be open for relief. In other words, whoever comes into your house, no matter how upset he is, how unhappy he is, how embarrassed he is, he should find relief. He can find relief in two ways. How you help him and attitude. How do you treat him? You make him feel like a human being, or you make him feel like a beggar. You make him feel like a beggar doing nothing at all. He says, your house should be pasuach levacha. And then it says, you aniyim b'nei v'secha, and poor people should be your b'nei bayis. You aniyim b'nei v'secha, poor people should feel at home in your home. These are not simple things. We wouldn't all be comfortable with this at all times. But as the Mishnah says, this is Yosef ben Yochanan saying this. Interesting, I'm going to quote to you soon words of Rabbi Lau, who wrote a beautiful essay on this subject over here, that we're being told over here as an aside. Rather than hire non-Jewish servants or slaves where that applied, rather hire Jewish servants. You aniyim b'nei v'secha, hire Jews to be the employees in your home. Give them a home, make them feel at home, etc. Okay. And now comes the next part of the Mishnah, which really in the Avos Reb Nosson doesn't even appear. In the Avos Reb Nosson, which was a collection of Mishnayot, which was a separate collection aside of Pirkei Avos Reb Nosson doesn't have this. But this is a very famous part of the Mishnah. Everybody knows it. Now the question is, it sort of doesn't fit. It sort of seems to be added on. What's it doing here? This we're going to leave for next time. But nevertheless, I thought we should read it anyhow. So the Mishnah says, suddenly the Mishnah gets involved in male-female relationships. Suddenly the Mishnah gets involved in husband-wife relationships. So it's a new topic. There's nothing that happened in these few words to warn us that this is coming. All we said was, your house should be open. People should feel at home. It should be a house of midas hasodim, a house of chesed. Now it says, altar b'sicha im isha. Don't talk, I'm translating literally, do not talk too much to a woman. All right? Now, that, of course, it lends itself to the discussion about what's too much. For some people, no matter how much you talk, it's not enough. For some people, one word is too much. So what's too much? But here we're talking about the Tanner's idea, not ours. So what is the Tanner's idea too much? So it's not spelled out. What does it say? This expression we said over here refers even to your own wife. Even to your own wife with whom you're allowed to talk. It's a mitzvah to talk. All the more so with you, when it comes to somebody else's wife, you surely have nothing to talk about. Right? Now, many of the Roshim point out here, without getting involved in the topic, that if we're talking about of opening your house to the poor, obviously you have to talk to your wife. You can't do without your wife. But if your wife is really on the same page as you are, say some of the interesting commentaries, then she'll understand as you understand. You don't have to have a special meal for a guest. If a guy calls his wife from shul and says, "Look, I'm coming home, I'm bringing the uncle for breakfast," doesn't mean you got to run to the bakery. It means whatever we have at home, he's going to eat. If it's called leftovers, we'll eat leftovers. In other words, we don't have to offer a meal. We have to offer hospitality. Hospitality have to offer mikano chachomim. And from here, our sages now, they extended beyond. Now we're talking about male, female as a rule. What do they say? Whoever gets involved with the woman in sicha. Now the key word here is sicha, said in Mephoshim, because sicha means frivolous talk. It doesn't mean talk. Real talk is talk. Conversation is conversation. That's not sicha. Sicha is pitter-pat. It's for the sake of language. Anybody who's married sicha misha, it means of course horror. Every time you meet your wife, you say, "Now what can I tell her? What can I tell her about someone that she doesn't know? What can she tell me with I don't know?" That's called frivolous. That's called sicha. So he says, whoever is married sicha misha, geirim roll outsmai, causes self-harm, but tell me the Torah. At the end, he can't learn Torah. He has no time for Torah. He has no interest in Torah. At the end, he becomes a person who plunges down instead of going up. Instead of being a Ben Eliyah, becomes a Yerid Mat. There are so many Mephoshim, but they said we'll deal with this again. But I just remember two things. No, this is taking time. When 20 years ago when I taught this the first time around, I remember one of the Mephoshim, I haven't seen it yet on this round, said, Sicha means frivolous talk. Frivolous means unnecessary talk. Talk that's redundant. Talk that's for the sake of wasting time. Talk that doesn't mean anything. So I think it was Avos Rab Nosson, which is a Tanner, who said as follows: if a man comes home every day from work and tells his wife how he was mishandled, how he was insulted, how people didn't treat him with respect, you know what's going to happen? First of all, she's going to hate the guy, but she can do nothing about it. He's not in a position to help you in any way whatsoever. So all you're doing is you are depressing your wife by telling her things she can't handle. But furthermore, you'll achieve something else. You do that now over an extended period, she'll say, what kind of shlemiel did I marry? Look, I married a guy who can't stand up for himself. I married a guy who's a pushover. So he says, so in other words, it's going to work against you. Roll out spy. It's going to bounce back at you. Don't talk. Don't talk. To deal with, you can't deal with yourself, and otherwise don't talk about it, because you don't have to depress someone for no reason at all. All right. Now having said that, Rabbi Yisai, let me get to the Mishnah here. How are we doing time-wise? Chaim, what's the time? No, 5:30.
25. You're doing fine. You're doing good.
I haven't started yet. How much time do I have?
15, 20 minutes.
All right, let's see how long we're in. Okay. All right. I'm referring over here to this essays written by Rabbi Halpern. It's a book I wrote 50 years ago on Pirkei Avos, where he tried to explain every Mishnah through the life of the Tanner. In other words, he talked about the Tanner. Here he's talking about Yosef and Yisrael. And in this story here, he's trying to tell us what the Mishnah was all about. Right? Okay. And I mentioned earlier, so it's only to repeat it, these are the three things these Mishnayos he referred to. All right. Now, interesting. So Yosef ben Yezer described one aspect of the Torah. Yosef ben Shlomo is now talking about Gemilas Chasodim. Gemilas Chasodim. Now we know Gemilas Chasodim is an old Jewish mitzvah. Where does Gemilas Chasodim come from? Avraham Avinu. The first patriarch, Avraham Avinu, was Gemilas Chasodim. Avraham Avinu was Achnosis Orchim. All the values that we talk about, that was Avraham Avinu. And the Medrash says that the tent of Avraham had a tent. It was open at both ends. It was open at both ends. So whatever direction you came from, there was an entrance. You could enter the tent of Avraham, right? Both ends, okay. Now, when a guest came, Avraham, we went out to meet him. He didn't wait for the guy to come to him. He ran out to meet him, etc. Whichever direction he came from, he invited him to the tent. He washed his feet in case it was a pagan. Refresh himself, rest and eat, and give him something before going on his way. Okay, so this was Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu, tent open on two sides. Now, interesting, Avos Reb Nosson tells us that he had a chosid. He was followed by Eov, Job, the famous Job, tried to imitate Avraham Avinu. He wanted to be the Baal Chesed Avraham was, and he used to praise Avraham for his hospitality. Now, Eov's house had entrances on four sides. Imagine you live in Johannesburg today, we don't have entrance on more than one side, though, for obvious reasons. But Eov's tent was open on four sides. Whichever direction a person came, he was at home. There was no separate entrance for tradesmen, for salesmen, for beggars, for mishlochim, nothing at all. One entrance for everybody. Wherever you came from, you were able to enter. Right? In other words, and the fact that wherever a person came, he found an entrance, made him feel not embarrassed to enter. He felt welcome. So this is what Eve did. Eve tried to make everybody feel welcome, and thus he had entrance on four sides. And there's a pasuk in Eve, Laman Aleph, where Eve uses these words. He says, "Im emna mechefes zalim." Was there a poor man, an orphan or a widow, who came to me that I did not feed and clothe? Was there anyone who I didn't feed and clothe? Did I ever eat my own bread and keep it to myself only? So he was very proud of himself. He was very proud of himself, etc., because he had entrances on four sides, etc. Very Shom, however, said to Eve, no, you're not Avraham. Don't kid yourself. You think you're a Talmud of Avraham, and maybe better than Avraham, because you wait for them to come to you. You wait for the poor man to come to your house, and then you're going to take care of him. Avraham will seek him out. He saw him in the distance. When 3 days after his bris, when the sun was shining, he couldn't rest. He had to have guests, etc. And that's the story, of course, of the Malachim, which we all know about. And Avraham used to see them in, and at the end, escort them out so they don't get lost. In other words, Avraham did lefnim mishur sadim. Now, later in history, Rabbi Yehuda Hanosi, who was the editor of the Mishnah, etc., was reminded of Yosef ben Yochanan's dictum. He was reminded in the days of Yehuda Hanosi there was a terrible famine. There was a famine. So what he did, he opened his storehouses. He opened the storehouses. There's a Gemara, he opened the storehouses, but he made a Tanai that it could only be given to the Talmidei Chacham. They stipulated only that the Chacham could benefit from his rastin. When one of the Tanoim pointed out to Yehuda Hanosi that the Bereshit even fed the animals. God feeds animals and all those who are needy, regardless of learning. So he backed off. He backed off and he changed it. Right? Okay. Now, interesting. When I used to have a charusa when I was very young. He tells that his chus I learned with a person who was my Rebbe, my friend, my guide, very instrumental in sending me to South Africa, whose children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren have built major institutions in Israel today where Dovi's sons learned. And that's my Rosh Yeshiva's friend was Rabbi Sorotsky Zechron Avraham. And I remember learning a Gemara in Baba Kama with him. This Gemara that what he called that Yudah Nossi said that the people that are trying to trap me, my enemies, he said, please, he says, try to entrap them. In other words, if somebody asks them for tzedakah, let those people not be genuine. Let's do that. So the question is, does that take away from tzedakah? Someone asks for tzedakah, someone needs tzedakah, and you give him tzedakah, but it turns out not to be as nice as you thought. Does that diminish your tzedakah? So Rabbi who said this fellow, I'll never forget, this is in the early 50s. He said, when you help a poor person, you're doing two things. Number one, you're helping him, giving him food to eat, but not starving. Number two, whatever he's going to do with the energy that you're providing him with, you're a partner. You're a partner in that. So that was his tefillah. Okay, tzedakah, you gave it. It's great. But those were the words. Entrap them with people who are not megonim. They shouldn't have the schar, the never-ending reward, the spin-off and the spin-off and the spin-off. Right? Okay. So, we're running late over here. All right. Now, in my friend of my helper's essay, he goes on to say, Yossi ben Yochanan Ziktam, this Mishnah we're reading over here, was followed by the Perushim. The Perushim, we are the Perushim, what we call Torah Jews, Orthodox Jews, etc. And the Tzedukim, which we introduced last time, the Sadducees, they were the elite. They were the rich. They appealed to the rich. They wanted to change. They wanted to modernize. So according to Avos Reb Nosson, the Tzedukim ate from gold and silver vessels. They wanted to attract the rich. They wanted the rich people to come into their house. So how could a poor man be invited to eat at a table where everything was gold and silver? He couldn't even look at them, let alone pick them up and eat out of them. So they were uncomfortable. They were uncomfortable, of course, they didn't come. But the Hellenists and the Sadducees were interested in practicing hospitality for their own benefit. They invited guests who would enhance their prestige. They wanted to be more popular, well thought of, etc., who could improve their social standing. In other words, Rabbi Yossi's words aimed at them. What do we say? Everybody should feel at home. Don't overdo it. And then, because we had the Essenes, the third group, who became firmer than anybody else, and they became experts in Tumim Tara to the extent that nobody could live with them, and many of them never got married because they knew they could never have wives who could live up to the standards they wanted to practice, etc. So they also turned people away. People didn't want to eat with them. People couldn't eat with them, etc. But the Chazal, the tradition we have, was the Chesed Avram. The Chesed Avram, which was even to pagans, wash their feet so as to bring the dust of their ways, etc. Okay. Let me conclude with the final few words of this essay here. In the final analysis, the mitzvah of Chesed benefits the one who practices. Let's shout, right? If someone practices midas chassadim, he is blessed by the guest with a blessing in his heart and on his lips. As the Chazal tell us, whoever was a guest in the tent of Avram, davened and prayed, may the Almighty bless you for your kindness. And the prayers of the poor, because their mates in cedar are always heard, right? And then the Mishnah goes on, and then interesting, the Avos Reb Nosson, which is a genuine version of the Mishnah, apart from Pirkei Avos, ends here. In other words, the next part of the Mishnah about Al Tabas Sichem Isha is not found in Avos Reb Nosson. It ends here, And I think this is as far as we can go right now. So we're going to conclude here. And thank you so much, Darren. Thank you so much. Great to see you and your wife and your kids. And may Chayla Choil.
Amen. Thank you, Dad. Thank you
Thanks
very
very
much.
much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Dad.
Thank you.
Thank you.
very much. Toda rabba.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Roseanne. How are you?
Thank you so much. Fantastic. Thank God. Great to see you.
Sweet as ever.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for coming.
So amazing to see you.